Hello, hello. We're live. Starting off tonight, that my phone, my watch, and my computer disagree on the time. And they're all Apple products. So, don't know what that is. According to my watch and my phone, it's 9 p.m. exactly. My computer is saying it's 9:02. So, interesting. Didn't know it would ever disagree by that much. We must be getting our time from different places. G'day, Thomas. And we've got some kind words from Liam Lad42 as well. Thank you very much. You made them before the live stream started and I saw them, so thank you. Channel updates. 7 of you watching now. Impressive. Let's start. Channel updates. Uni is coming to an end for me, or at least this semester is. G'day, Steve. And so what that will mean is I'll be able to start making regular uploads again. So yeah, that should be good. Regular uploads will start in about 2 weeks' time. So exciting. And I'll continue these live streams, of course, as well. So, tonight's topic, down to 3 people. Big burst at the beginning, but we're back. Anyway, so tonight's topic is the dangers of over-preservation. And I might be exaggerating a little bit there with the danger part. I can't say there's danger in the traditional sense of the word of over-preserving stuff, but you'll see what I mean. Let me plug my phone in. So, by over-preservation, the gist of what I'm saying is that you drown out other things that are also worthy of preserving. If you preserve too much of the one stuff, of the one thing, over-preservation, then you risk losing other stuff, be it losing interest in it or even losing having a physical copy of it. So the thumbnail is of a W-class tram that's running on the city circle. And I believe the W-class trams are the perfect example of over-preservation. So I'm sure many of you here are tram enthusiasts of some sort or another, but if I asked you, or maybe even the general public, to think of just an old tram, right? What would it be? What would you or the general public be picturing? Especially if you're from Melbourne or Australia, you probably think of something that resembles a W-class tram. And fair enough, because they're everywhere. There are literally hundreds of them that have been preserved. Well, I don't know, but it's certainly over 100. And there were hundreds of them built. So it's, on the one hand, it's incredible that they've been preserved so well. But on the other hand, how many other old tram classes can you name other than W class from Melbourne? Probably not many. And here my case rests. Now, that's not to say that other trams types have not been preserved. You just have to take a visit to the Hawthorn Tram Museum. It's probably the closest one to Melbourne City Centre, and you'll see. there's a whole bunch of trams, old trams that have been preserved, and they're all pretty nice. But you know what? None of them run, or at least none of them are allowed to run, because they're all, the main reason is that they are all trolley pole, and the whole network, the whole tram network is not compatible with trolley poles. You've got to have a pantograph. Of course, W-class trams were also trolley pole back when they were built, but the modern W8 subclass has been converted to pantographs. So, g'day Applehead, Brian and Albert. So yeah, I find it such a shame that they can't run. And if there was a stronger tram preservation movement, if the general public were more aware of the different types of trams, then I think it could be really good to get them running and have them do special tours. I mean, for example, there's one which it's actually newer than a W class, fancy that, but it was decorated by a Pakistani artist. And so, yeah, I think that's pretty cool. And I'd love to take a ride on it. And there's old cable tram replicas. There's four-wheel trams. You know, there's the old toast rack style, longitudinal seating. There's heaps of variation, and if you want to see a bit of variation of preserved trams that are running, you've got to go, basically. Unstable connection. All right, we're back. Sorry about that. Unstable connection. And so, yeah, you've got to travel to really get to experience it. And so, therefore, not as many people know about it, which is a shame. I think that even if Yarra Trams was a real stickler, and they can be sometimes, then they could say, look, as long as you convert all the trams to have a metal frame that meets our crash standards and convert them all to pantograph operation, and you've got to pay us to run on the network and stuff, yeah, that would be good. But I believe they don't even allow W-class trams to be run outside of the city circle or restaurant tram route. So that's why you don't see that many heritage tram tours in Melbourne, but you do see plenty of heritage train tours. Now, over-preservation is not limited to trams. It definitely exists in the railways as well, but I feel like it's less of an issue. So Liam asks, do you think it's influenced by the ease of their commercialisation though? It's more difficult to repair and keep parts for various types of trams versus parts / factory for just one. Yes and no. I think that as a regular city circle style tram that runs every day, then yes, keeping it to one type of tram is probably a good idea. But what I'm saying is that I'd like to see other trams run on the occasion as well. And it wouldn't be overly difficult to maintain a fleet of trams that are running because, hey, Ballarat and Bendigo do it. And you see similar sorts of things in railway preservation groups as well. They have plenty of variety. And hey, a lot of the trams do actually share a lot of parts. So, yeah. Albert asks, it's possible for a tram museum to operate their own dedicated track and run the old trams, like the Sydney Tramway Museum? Yes, that is in theory possible. And of course, that's what Ballarat and Bendigo do. They run their own track. And it's on the street even. But even off the street, what do you call it? Bylands. The Bylands Museum comes to mind. They've got a great collection. I haven't actually been there, but I'd like to go there someday. They don't currently operate trams along their track, but they've got it and they used to do it. I'm not familiar with the details of exactly why they lost their license to do so and what's stopping them from regaining it. There's a bunch of politics involved with them versus Hawthorn, and yeah, it's a bit messy. The tram enthusiast community can be equally, if not more toxic than the railway enthusiast community. Looking at the flip side of things for a minute, too little preservation. There are dangers in that as well. If you preserve, yeah, I guess I should preface all this by saying, in a perfect world, you would preserve everything, because why not? It's a perfect world. But we don't live in a perfect world, and so we have to live with and make compromises. In terms of trams, cable trams have basically not been preserved. There's a couple of cable trams, or bits and pieces from cable trams lying about here and there, but as a general statement, cable trams have not been well preserved. Now, yes, a lot of that does come down to the fact that when they were retired, preservation just wasn't in people's minds. It's really more of a, I'll say post-1950s. Post-1950s is when preservation, at least in Victoria, really came into its own, and everyone started getting together and started to organise stuff to actually be preserved. Liam says, we also have a collection of consciousness that will dictate what should/shouldn't be preserved. Yes and no again. There are definitely some people in any enthusiast hobby who think that certain things should not be preserved because they grew up with it and it's common to them and it doesn't seem old or special to them, and so why don't preserve the modern stuff. But you've also got to think that today's normal is tomorrow's history. So that's why ideally you should preserve everything, because it might be normal to you, but it won't be normal to the next generation. And using a railway metaphor, well, not metaphor, but using an example from the railway enthusiast community, there's a lot of people who think that, oh yeah, Tates, preserve the Tates, but and maybe the Hartashis, maybe the Commangers, but Siemens and Extrapolis, nah, don't preserve them. Who wants to keep them? They're garbage. Well, they exist, and they have formed a significant part of Melbourne's railway history, and so one day I'd love to see Hitachi, Comenge, Siemens, Strapless, even HCMT preserved, because they all have had their role. And that's what preservation is all about. It's representing the role that that particular thing had on history. Albert asks, did Melbourne ever run any steam trams? And if so, did any survive? I don't think we ran any steam trams. We ran cable trams, of course, but I don't think we ran steam trams like Sydney did, and certainly none survive. I'm not as familiar with Melbourne, with our tramway history as I am with railway history. And we're talking street tramways here, by the way. I'm sure you gathered that already, but not the bush or industrial type tramway. Daniel asks, have you heard that Steam Rail is going to see if K183 is flexible or not? Is fixable, sorry, or not? Yes, I've heard that, and we'll see what comes out of that. There are definitely some people who think that K183 shouldn't be preserved or shouldn't be fixed up, because it was, for those who don't know, K183 it's a Victorian steam train. It had a good life in preservation until a bit over 10 years ago, I think, when it was involved in a pretty serious level crossing accident where the crew were killed, I believe. Nasty accident. Definitely don't want anything like that to happen again, but yeah, I still think K183 should be fixed. Some people disagree, but so now I'd like to look at a few examples and try and give you an idea of where I believe the line is between too little preservation and too much preservation. 2002 was the accident in Stanley, so there you go, almost 20 years ago. And so, yeah, I'll be mainly going through railway examples here because it's what I'm more familiar with. Though I'm sure you can translate some of these examples to tramway. Anyway, well, before I get into this, a little mention of the S-class steam engines. They played arguably the biggest role in preservation, in railway preservation in Victoria, because it's well regarded that the scrapping of them is the biggest loss of the preservation movement, and it also, at the time, kick-started the forming of the ARHS Museum, which has now just changed its name to Newport Rail Museum. But yeah, that's what kick-started it all. And so, yeah, just in one sense, yes, it would be very nice if it was preserved, but if it was preserved, then would we be missing out on potentially other things, that other items of rolling stock and whatnot that have now been preserved as a result of the determination from scrapping the S-Class, if you get what I mean. So that's something to keep in mind. Also to keep in mind, you can't keep everything. You just can't. Why? Because A, limited space, B, limited memory. So, in the railway examples, is the K-Class over-preserved? In some ways, I think it is. I don't know how many K-Classes are up and running. I'd say it's probably about 6 or 7. That's my guess, off the top of my head, without really thinking about it too much. But they are common so far as the preserved steam engine goes, and they're not particularly special as a result. If there was only 1 or 2 of them preserved, then they would be more special. But even in their general life, they weren't anything special. They were a light goods, branch line goods locomotive. Yeah, they were just meant to be workhorses, and that's what they were. How do you decide what's important? You have to look at the history of the item, and you have to look at and make a decision based on that. And I'll go into further detail as we go along. So yeah, not only are a lot of K-classes preserved, I mean, yeah, all runnable at the moment. 160 is under restoration to become runnable, so that makes 4. And there are a bunch more sitting in parks and whatnot, in a museum. It is definitely nice to have enough to go around, so that, you know, Mornington can have one, Malden can have one, the museum can have one, Steam Rail can have one. It's nice to have a few to go around, but going back to what I was saying before, limited resources, if you had the option, pardon me, if you had the option of restoring a K-class, say one, not overhauling, because K160 is more of an overhaul than a restoration, a complete restoration. But let's say you pulled a K-class out of the park and you were going to restore it, then it's a bit like, you've got limited resources. You can only, say every 10 years, you can only restore 3 or 4 at absolute most locomotives. Usually only 1 or 2. But I would I'd much rather see something else restored to a workable condition that does not see much of a representation, even from the same sort of general, not class, but category of branch line goods locomotives. For example, the N class. How many N classes are running? None. 1 is in the museum. 1 has been shipped over to South Australia, which I believe is getting restored. Apart from that, they're non-existent, really. So N class is under-preserved. K class, I wouldn't say it's over-preserved, because there's sort of just enough to go around, and that's enough. But I wouldn't necessarily look at preserving more. I would rather divert that to something else. Daniel said the J and the D3 are also over-preserved. I would say they are underpreserved, actually. The D3, well, we've pretty much got one D3 that's in working order. We've got a bunch that are not working order. And the J, in terms of J class, yeah, I think we've got one in working order at the moment, and a couple that are around could be turned into working order. But yeah, I think that they are, in the scheme of things, underpreserved. Similar case, the R class. They are, you'd call them a large express passenger locomotive. Again, I think in a similar basket to the K class, there's enough of them to go around, because we've got, what, 3 running and a 4th one able to be restored. So there's enough to go around, but yeah, there's no, if you're going to throw your money into another express passenger locomotive, there aren't too many other options. I mean, the S class is one, but that's a pipe dream. I'd rather see funds diverted into something else. And new build locomotives, for that matter, given the N class. Oh yeah, R766 has been doing tests. So there you go, 4 running, the 5th able to be restored. Yeah, new build locomotives. There's a bit of a conflict there, because you are resurrecting something that would otherwise have been lost, but at the same time you're diverting resources away from other things. And through all of this, going back to the limited resources idea, you've got to, the more stuff you restore, the more you have to maintain. And maintenance costs a lot of money. So you've got to keep that in mind as well. So yeah, in other words, the R class, not overpreserved, not underpreserved. The NA class. Now that's the real interesting one. I'd err on the side of saying that they are overpreserved. If you think Puffing Billy, you think NA class. You just do. But there's the G class, the Garretts. Puffing Billy have just recently restored the NGG Garrett, South Australian Garrett. And they've got a bunch of other special locomotives, and credit to Puffing Billy, the NAs are their workhorses, and they do have other special locomotives that they bring out on the occasion, such as the Climax geared steam locomotive. Yeah. It's a tough one to say whether I would, if I was in Puffing Billy's position, would I restore another NA class or not? If they've got them and they need them, they just need another workhorse, then okay, fine. But the other thing that I sort of lament, if you like, is that because the NAs are so tied into Puffing Billy's identity, everyone forgets Walhalla. The Walhalla Goldfields Railway, they don't have any steam locomotives. They've just got diesels. And the NA classes, in their working times, they did run to Walhalla. So I would like it if Walhalla was given one to restore, and then, yeah, hopefully they could get a bit more touristy traffic for their thing. Having said that, I've never been myself, but it's definitely on my list. And steam engines in general, they, on the one hand, you might say there's so many steam engines preserved. Do we really need it? For example, none of them are running at the moment, or at least not in Victoria. So should you restore another steam engine, or should you restore an electric locomotive? It's a tough one. It's tough because, although, yes, it's true, electric locos have been almost forgotten in comparison to steam engines, even though they're often of a similar age. But steam, it's just a fact of life that in preservation, you have to attract the general public. Enthusiasts alone will not support your operations. And so you have to attract the general public. How do you do that? Not with an electric locomotive. That's an enthusiast thing, for sure. Steam engines, on the other hand, they attract the public. So if it was needed to attract the public in order to potentially get enough funds so that an electric locomotive could maybe one day be restored, I'd be for that. Western Victorian Railway says R766 gets past though since it's on standard gauge. Yes, I partially agree with you. It's still an R class, but yes, it's good to see. I would definitely give it more crap if it was on broad gauge. And it was definitely an interesting experiment, given that the R classes were always designed to be gauge convertible, but of course never were in the beginning. And so it's been an interesting experiment at the very least. Albert says, it does make me feel a bit envious with New South Wales only ever having one operational member of a particular class. Yes, absolutely. And you again have to keep in mind that we are lucky in Victoria to have so much preserved railway stuff running. But we can talk another time about the needs of preservation and why I think Melbourne has done so much better than Sydney, even though we've got roughly similar population sizes. Western Victorian Railway says, I think Walhalla Goldfields Railway do have one steamer, but I'm not too sure about that. They definitely don't have one running. Oh, okay, just call you Dave. Righto, we'll do from now on. Here's another example from the railways. The E-class, the E-type carriages, extremely common. Are they over-preserved? Again, yes and no. On the one hand, I would love to see other wooden carriages restored. You know, the E-type carriages weren't the only ones. We've got them, and they work. They're the backbone of Steam Rail's fleet, for sure. And a few other preservation groups as well. But Steam Rail is the main one that comes to mind. And it's funny because when steam rail first sort of started, they were using their original, what they called the vintage train, was a set of V-type carriages. Now, those carriages still exist, they just haven't been in operational condition for quite some time. I would like to see them restored over another E-type carriage. But yeah, I've also got to distinguish between a complete restoration and a overhaul, if you like. If they've got a carriage that's been running for the past 10 years and it's been a great part of their fleet, but it just needs a bit of major work now, yeah, all right. Give it the work it needs, because that's going to be cheaper than restoring a totally new carriage. And yeah, it's going to serve a greater benefit. This whole thing is really about weighing up the benefits of what to do. What is going to benefit preservation and history the most? It's not an easy task. It's not clear. And I'm definitely not the only one who's got an opinion on it. And I'd encourage you to donate your time/money to any preservation, no matter what. I try to, well, when I'm not so busy with uni, I'll definitely be going back to it. And I did try in the early years of year 12 and uni to donate a bit of my time to preservation, but life gets in the way. Dave says, just wait until V-Line retires the N-sets and mobs like Steam Rail Victoria will get their hands on them. Yes, and if they serve a good purpose, then again, go for it. And carriages are a bit of a different story, because obviously for every one steam or diesel locomotive, you've got to have a set of probably at least 6 carriages on average, say. So there's a lot more room to preserve carriages than there is locomotives. Yeah. With the recent distributions of the A-class, I think that's great, and I think that has really struck the balance between under and over preservation. I think, well, 2 have been distributed right now, A60 and A62, and then the other 2 that are left, A66 and A70, will both be preserved at some stage in the future. So thank you very much, V-Line. And I think that if there was a call, not a call, but a movement, if you like, voices of people who were saying a few years ago that the Pacific National A-classes should be preserved. I feel like while they had good intentions, if the Pacific National ones and V-Line's ones were all preserved, that would count as over-preservation in my mind. There's perhaps room for 1 or 2 more, but anyway. And B classes, for that matter, there's enough of them running around. I wouldn't. You go back to what I was saying before, is in that if it's a workhorse and it's needed and it's easy, then go for it. If not, perhaps look at something else. Daniel says, most likely A66 will go to Steam Rail Victoria and the other A will go to someone else. Yes. That's the most likely case. We'll see. They're not getting rid of, they're not, not sure why they're still holding on to A70, but they're still holding on to A66 because they feel like they may or may not require it still. It's also good to see the recent allocations of the S-type carriages to 707 operations amongst other groups. See more. But in carriages, you've got to have a variety as well. It's nice to have these sets of carriages like an E-type set, an N set, S set, whatever. And Steam Rail are classic for making up blocks of trains that they use for different purposes. And block trains absolutely have a place, are absolutely useful, but at the same time, it's nice to have the occasional mix-up and have variety in carriages. Like, don't just have sitting carriages, have some dining cars, have some sleeper cars, have some lounge cars, and I think that there's definitely space for a few modern interpretations, such as Steam Rail's controversial BZ dance car. That's a nice little project, mainly run by Paul Marnie and his DJ stereo system. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. A70 is being used for parts. I don't believe so. So is A60 and A62. Oh, yes, they were using them for parts, all the A classes, but I don't believe that they are going to use them anymore. Parts. The engines that the N classes run on, they're fairly common around the world, and so spare parts isn't a big deal. So now that I've sort of talked about the line between over and under preservation, I'd like to make a note of the old Spotswood Reclamation Depot. It was a place where excess railway stuff, instead of being chucked in the bin or scrapped as the first port of call, it would often be sent to the Spotswood Reclamation Depot. And there, the general public could buy it. Now, of course, not everything made it out of there. Some stuff just sat there for a while, and then after a while, they're like, okay, well, no one wants it, we'll scrap it or whatever. But think of it as the op shop of the railways. And I'd love to see that come back, perhaps in a different form. It doesn't necessarily have to be a physical thing, a physical place that you go to, but give the public, I think it would be a good idea to give the public the opportunity to buy some stuff. Now, you could argue that what's the point in giving public the opportunity to buy stuff if it's just going to do what so many freight wagons and other stuff did, which was go to someone's farm, sit out in the weather for decades and rust or rot away. What's the point in giving it to the public if that's what they're going to do with it? They're not really preserving it, they're just letting it decay. Well, I would definitely like, to that I would say, I'd definitely like to see the things offered to preservation groups first, And if preservation groups, if nobody wanted it in preservation groups or museums, that sort of thing, then offer it to the general public. I'd love to, I'd even say you could have it, if you just want to get rid of items, you could have an auction, like an online auction store type thing. There are plenty of online auction houses that I'm sure would love to work with the railways, but they could even set up their own type thing. You know, figure out what it costs them to run it and set a minimum starting bid for items and give it a shot. Better than throwing it out and scrapping it. Yeah, Dave says he's heard holding on to A70 for parts to keep 66 going. Sounds like a wild rail fan rumour. Going back to the online reclamation site thing, of course it doesn't have to be online. In terms of preservation groups, not everything has to be gifted to preservation groups. It's a tough one because they obviously don't have a lot of money, and perhaps they couldn't afford to pay full market price for everything if they were bidding alongside everyone else in the general public. But I think if it was offered to them as a guaranteed sale type thing at a set price that they agree on, like say for a carriage, $100, might just $100 plus any transportation costs. That's enough to cover any admin fees, say, and of course transportation to get it to the preservation group. I think that's fair enough. Yeah, but yeah, full price perhaps for some stuff, certainly not for the majority of stuff. That pretty much brings me to the end of my notes, and I've still got another 10 odd minutes to go. So if anyone's got any questions, you want me to go over anything, any more examples, let me know in the comments. Otherwise, I'll think of something. I guess we haven't talked about the preservation of railway lines. We've pretty much solely focused on railway rolling stock and locomotives and that type of thing, but we haven't talked about lines. I could talk about that. Albert says Melbourne doesn't do well in bus preservation. Yes, that's true. Albert says Sydney has over-preserved double-deck buses. Yeah. Buses, I think that's partially because buses were never as big of a thing in Melbourne as they were in Sydney. You got rid of your trams to be replaced with buses, and we were going to do that, but thankfully that was avoided. But yeah, it would be nice to see more bus preservation. And I wanted to say something else about buses. Yeah, a lot of people in Melbourne have a negative attitude towards buses. At least the modern buses, they do. I think a lot of people feel that they are slow, not that reliable, and a bit dangerous at night. All things that definitely need to be improved, and I can talk in another future live stream about public transport and what should be done. That, just thinking which, I should add that to my list of live stream ideas. Improved. There's a lot of underinvestment in buses in Melbourne, though. Very true that. As I was saying before, there's a lot that can be done to fix buses, but there's just not the willpower. I guess I'll talk a little bit about tourist railways to finish off the stream, and preservation of railway lines, which is a slightly hot topic at the moment, with the South Gippsland line being partially pulled up. It's a tough one. And again, it all goes back to the idea of limited resources. It's not easy to run a tourist railway. And although there are a lot of lines that were scenic and would be nice to see, it's just not that feasible. Chief examples are the Mansfield line and the Cudgel line. Those are the two that I really see people going, oh, I wish they were preserved. I wish somebody made a tourist railway out of them. Problem with the Mansfield line, it's close enough to Melbourne, but it's just too long. So I don't see it being feasible. Cudgel line, again, too long and too far out of Melbourne. I've heard some people very idealistically say that all lines should have been preserved. I don't think so. There are plenty of boring lines. The boring ones are the ones they haven't heard of. They're not calling them to be preserved because they've never heard of them, and rightly so. They're boring. Boring lines include the Walden to Shelburne line. Empty fields. Not really that interesting. There's a line that comes off I'm looking for it. Yes, the Ben Nevis to Navarre line. Bet you've never heard of that one. It's because it was boring. Yeah, we could go on, but yeah. Certain lines, they might be scenic, but they just can't be feasibly preserved. Now, with that in mind, what about rail trails? A lot of enthusiasts have a negative attitude towards rail trails, and I've spoken a little bit about this in the past, but they have a negative attitude towards them, I think mainly because they believe that a train should be there, not a walking path, not a cycling path. I want a train there. And even if there's no trains there to begin with, and it's just a disused rail line that's been there for a while, on the one hand, from my own personal perspective, I'm like, well, I like hiking abandoned railway lines, and so the more the merrier. And so rail trails are sort of, in a lot of ways, contrary to the stuff that I like to do, but I have to be real at the same time and go, that's a pretty niche interest, and the legalities of it are a bit grey, because, you know, technically the land's still owned by VicTrack. They didn't give you permission to walk across this disused line, but from my position, who really cares? It's not like it's being used for anything. It's not like you're doing any damage. Yeah, so I've got to say, if converting it to a rail trail means that people are going to get some use out of it, then yeah, do it. And rail trails, contrary to popular belief, were originally envisaged to preserve rail lines so that they could potentially have rails put back on them in the future. And I believe it was a Australian, if not Victorian, idea, mainly, that's now spread worldwide. Another interesting side note, there's a disused rail line in Tasmania that I was planning to visit that is called, they call them the rail track riders, I think. Disused tracks, and they use pedal-powered rail vehicles, and people can pay to, you know, pedal up and down the line. Great use of an old rail line. And if there was, you know, a couple more examples of that in different states, I'd be all for it. But yeah, the rail trails, if it often, and also another thing to keep in mind with rail trails is if it makes a difference between the land being relatively preserved and the land being sold off to farmers, and, you know, you can basically only see the earthworks, if that. Which would you rather, honestly? I think you'd all rather the rail trail. Albert says, my opinion is a lot of the people who want all the far-flung railway lines preserved would never visit them anyway if they were there. If they were. Very good point. And a lot of them don't visit the existing lines and stuff. Or if they do, it's just to take photos. That's another big problem of the railway enthusiast community, is that there's a lot of line-side photographers who never contribute anything to the stuff that they're taking photos of. Nothing wrong with taking photos, but put your money where your mouth's at. Or if you don't have any money, put your time where your mouth's at. If you don't have either, well, at least try to acknowledge that you're taking photos of stuff and that other people have gone through a lot of effort to preserve. Anyway, we've just ticked over the hour mark, so I think I'll wrap it up there. Hope this has been an interesting discussion for you all, and yeah, something to think about. And if it really interests you, then have a think about where your line is between over and under preserved. And just like mine, it can definitely change depending on the situation. Anyway, thanks for watching. Live stream in 2 weeks' time, and hopefully a video in about 2 weeks' time. That'll be exciting. Thanks. See you later.